Okay, so one thing that I've noticed is this texture paint area. People have asked how you use it, and when you go into it straight away, you think it should just be very, very easy to actually paint a cube without loads of messing around. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. As you can see, we go in here, we select a texture paint, and just nothing happens whatsoever. Sometimes you might get an error message. I'm going to show how to actually set everything up so you can use the texture paint. So the first thing you need to do is you actually need to start in UV editing and just check that your object has a proper UV map that is to scale. So if we look here, because this is just a basic cube, it's all nicely to scale. And by the way, if you actually are in object mode, it won't show the UV map at all. You have to tab it and make sure you're in edit mode. Anyway, so great. So far we've got a UV map. That's what we want. And we've got an object. If your object needs unwrapping, just come up here and do unwrap. Now, you might have a problem if you've got a very complex model. It'll be all out of shape and boundary. I'll put a link how to do UV mapping in the description because I've got a separate video on that process. Anyway, so just for now, unwrap, do a smart project, and then just click OK. As you'll notice here, it doesn't work very well on a cube, but I'm not that really worried because I'm going to actually use this as an example of why this can be a problem when you're texture painting. Okay, moving on then. We don't go into texture paint yet. We're going to head over to shading. So we're over here in shading, and this is our plan. We're going to actually want to paint it, but to actually texture paint it, you need to do a bit of fiddling around with this area here. It's the actual nodes. If you ever want to go into your game development, particularly in the Unreal Engine, learning how to use nodes is a must if you want beautiful textures that are well lit or look like glass or anything like that. But for now, we're just going to do the very basic stuff because we're planning on texture painting. So heading over here into this window, and if I pop down here, as you can see, it's the shader editor. If you don't have this, just change whatever's here into it. Then you're going to go up to add, and you're going to add a texture, and then you're going to add an image texture. And you see you get this here, and you get a little node. We're then going to click new, and we're going to give it a name. Obviously, we want to give it a proper name. I'm going to call it test. That's not a proper name, but it'll do for now. And you can even change the color, the default color of this texture if you need to. I'm going to leave it as black for now. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to create a link between the nodes. So if you look up here, this is a principled BSDF. And all that is, it's just the default color of any object. So pretty much every object starts out with a default color. You can even see over here this default color is white, and I can move it around and change it. Now what we're actually going to do is we're going to pull the color over to the base color, and now you can see it's gone black because we set the default color of this to black. Now what we have is we've got an image texture in the background that we can use. Now we can finally get ourselves over to texture painting, and you'll see that UV map from before has now turned up over here in the shader. And you'll also know that, or you'll see here that we've got like a little paintbrush set of tools, and I've got obviously a paintbrush here, for want of a better word. There's not many options available directly inside Blender, but the idea is that you really would create a proper texture in a different engine and then move it across to here. But this makes a good starting point. You can actually, whatever you do here, you can actually export out to a JPEG or a PNG file and then play around with them somewhere else. So it makes a really good starting point. So I'm going to select a color for my brush. So I want to go for say a blue over here. And then I'm going to start kind of laying on the paint. Now you can do it over here on the map, on the UV map, or you can do it directly on this. Now, the reason I deliberately left this badly laid out is so you could see the problem with trying to paint onto the UV map. Over here, I've painted onto the object. Now you can see it's kind of created a good continuation, and it doesn't matter where on the UV map it is, they link together properly. If I move along the actual object and I start filling it in again, I can actually get it to blend nicely together. And then you can see it actually finds the correct place on the UV map of all the little joins and things like that. So it is good for that. Whereas if you paint directly onto the UV map, you actually end up with things getting split if you've not laid out your UVs correctly. You can see over here, can't you? You've got this circle that looks like it's all in one place, completely split across this cube. So there is actually a few things you have to consider, and getting your UV maps right is definitely a major important step. As I said, I do like painting straight onto the actual cubes, but just watch out because I'll show you a really interesting little trick. I'm going to put a perfect circle on this corner. Right, here I am, I'm doing it. And it looks like I've given it a perfect circle in that corner. It looks sphere, but that's actually an optical illusion. You can see what actually happens. It actually elongates it. So from one perfect position, it looks like you've got a perfect sphere. But as you move around, it's not that at all. So you have to actually be very careful and very mindful about what you think you're drawing to what's actually turning up. And you can even see on the UV map, it's actually stretched out. So fun for creating optical illusions, but just not very good at doing it right. So you do have to kind of use a combination of the UV maps to get it right, and this here for, just adding the main textures. We could leave it there if we're just working inside Blender. Now, if you want to export what you've just done, you can go up to image here and you can do save as, and you can save it wherever you want here really. So just double checking, yeah, in texture painting, I've created a file called texture painting. I've got a little PNG that I can create, test PNG, save as, and then if you want to take the next step, say you're exporting it to something like Unreal, you do actually have to then head into the material attributes here and just make sure that you attach the file. So you need to actually change this to image texture, open the file and select the correct one. Now the reason behind that is, although the test node, the image test node in Blender is attached, if you export this model, say as an FBX, what happens is it doesn't take those nodes with it. They just get separated because of the process of creating FBX. But the link to the file stays in existence. So when you load it into something like the Unreal Engine, it'll actually stay there. In fact, luckily I've got Unreal open. Here's one that I was playing around with before. Got too many things open, so this is probably going to have trouble now. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of import in the other one. Ooh, I've got too many files open. You can tell I've got too much open because it's taken ages. And then, right, can we see here I've got that test map and I've got this untitled FBX. So I'm going to try and load this in. Fingers crossed it'll all come across. And it's got a few errors, but if you can see, we've got the test, we've got the material that's wrapped around it, and we've also got the cube. And it should, if I drag it across, now be the same model that we created in Blender. So there we go. It's really that simple. It's not actually that complex to do this at all. Hope that actually helped for anyone who's wondering how to texture paint. And just as a little bonus, I've gone and shown you how to put it into the Unreal Engine.